Thrilled to have with us in this segment Alan Osmolowski, who is with Blum Shapiro. How are you?
Hi, very well. How are you?
Good, Alan. So we were just talking before we launched the show, and I haven't opened up Jeff's gift yet. I suspect it's a mug, the way it was banging. But we were talking before the show started. Blum Shapiro just opened up their office here in Worcester.
We did, yeah. We've been in Worcester about a month now. We're very excited about that. We're over on Front Street. But 5,000 square feet and 25-person office, and so.
Yeah, and been kind of working on that for about a year.
Yes.
And Blum Shapiro, pretty significant size accounting firm.
Yeah, we're the largest regional CPA firm in New England, about 500 people, and we have offices in West Hartford, Boston, Quincy, Cranston, Rhode Island, and now Worcester.
Yeah. And we're thrilled with that, and it's kind of consistent with something that we've been seeing with a lot of professional service firms opening up offices in Worcester for a couple different reasons. They see a growing market in central Massachusetts.
Yes.
Also, employees, it's a heck of a lot better commute than maybe going into Boston or other places.
Sure is.
And I recall in some of the conversations with you and your team, better able to serve some area customers that you have.
Yes. Yeah, we see a lot of opportunity in this area in terms of growing our practice. With the whole renaissance happening in Worcester now, it really helped drive the decision. And also from a recruiting standpoint, when we put together our business plan for our office footprint, we really looked hard at this area and saw that there's a lot of people that we'd like to be part of our organization that are in the Central Mass, Metro West area and are commuting in and out of Boston. And now we could have an opportunity to have an office here to hopefully use that as a tool to recruit talent.
Yeah, and that's a big part of our work at the Chambers. We look to recruit, retain, incubate businesses. Part of the recruitment piece is access to the colleges and universities as companies look to hire new people, retain employees because of the quality of life that exists here in Central Mass, and then also through kind of the colleges and universities and the immigrant communities, helping incubate new businesses and creating an atmosphere of entrepreneurship. But you're a product of that a little bit because you're a Worcester State grad.
I am, yes. I grew up in Central Mass. Actually live 4 miles away from the studio here today, so this was
great commute.
Great commute. And started my career in public accounting, 30 years ago at a CPA firm that was based in Worcester, and that firm eventually merged to become what was a firm, Carlin, Sharon, and Rosen, and spent 10 years at 446 Main Street.
All right.
And then my career took me gradually farther east. And so now I'm very excited to be part of a team that's bringing our firm, for me, coming back into Worcester. So it's been great.
Yeah, and 446 Main Street, the Santander building or the Glass building, which also has been recently purchased by a pretty significant Boston real estate investment firm, seeing the value in Worcester. So appreciate your presence, and 25 employees in the downtown is a good presence as well.
Yes, yeah.
But it's almost the end of the year.
Yep.
And with that, there's not only the holidays and New Year's celebration, but people need to start thinking about April 15th and tax season.
It's going to be here soon.
It's going to be here soon. And in the past 2 years, there have been some pretty substantial changes in federal tax law. And why don't you give us a little overview of that?
Sure. Yeah, so we're here at the 2-year anniversary of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act being signed into law, which was some sweeping and historic tax reform. Really was the first time the federal tax code was overhauled until the Tax Reform Act of '86. So it's been, very significant. So very exciting times to be a tax professional, because I'm a tax partner within the firm.
Yeah.
So we've been very focused on this the last couple of years. But it was very much a bill that was rushed through Congress.
Right.
And there were a lot of things that weren't clarified, or things that needed to be addressed in more detail. So we've been.
And that's where it goes over the IRS, and they kind of put the codes and regulations into the law, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's been literally thousands of pages of regulations that have been issued by IRS since then. Some are still in draft form, some of which we're still waiting for. Part of the challenge is that the IRS really wasn't given any additional resources to implement this massive tax bill, and so it's been, I think, a challenge for them to work through all the details. And so that's really been our focus of what we've been doing over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and that's we've seen that on multiple fronts, as you just described. I mean, one of the things that we've focused on very early when this Federal Tax Act, most recent one, was passed, was the opportunity zones.
Yes.
And that presents an opportunity for many communities. Worcester, we've had 6 designated opportunity zones,
Yep.
and you want to get that investment and take advantage of that vehicle to the extent you can. But a lot of that was slowed, waiting for further regulations and clarifications, because you also don't want to rush and make a mistake.
Exactly. It's taken time for those funds to get set up to be able to make those investments. And in the fourth quarter of this year, we've seen a lot of activity now around opportunity zones, because there's advantages to getting money invested before the end of this year in terms of tax incentives. So really a lot of activity around that area in Q4, but there's just a lot of opportunities there.
Yeah, and you've said a lot of changes. I mentioned the opportunity zone, but any one particular change in this document that kind of impacts everybody, or that you're focused on?
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the largest driving factors of tax reform were corporate tax rates. The U.S. had the highest rates of any other OECD countries, some of the higher rates. And so corporate rates were reduced down to from 35% to 21%. And that's affected a lot of things. A lot of small businesses and a lot of businesses that are in the community here in Central Mass are pass-throughs, or S-corps and partnerships. For S-corps and partnerships, they didn't necessarily get a lower tax rate, but they got an additional deduction for qualified income. So they could, so income that would otherwise pass through to the owners of those entities would be reduced by 20% if they qualified. And that's called the Section 199 Cap A of the code. And so there's a lot of nuances and things we have to sort through, and there's 300 pages of regulations that came out around those. But we're seeing that affecting a lot of our clients in terms of opportunities and how you can combine different businesses and make sure you're getting the maximum benefit of that. So
Right. So kind of 2 different ways that this is impacted. And most of our members here at the Chamber are small businesses,
Yep.
5, 10 employees or less, and so how this tax act impacts them, very different than the larger companies.
Yes. And there's been a lot of discussion around, now that for C corporations, where corporate rates have come down to 21%, is there potentially an advantage for a small company, instead of being an S corp or partnership, to consider being a C corporation? And we've done that analysis for a lot of companies, and generally the answer is no. You're still better off being an S corp or a partnership if you're a small business.
Right. And and again, for people or any type of business, I mean, you're focused on making the widgets, delivering a service. Jeff, who was just with us, making the app.
Right.
Serving the meals at the restaurant. This is complicated stuff, and so that's why it's worth engaging to kind of find out how you either positively or adversely impacted. And so I assume constantly you're reaching out, talking to people, and letting them know about your services.
We are, yeah. It's a constant dialogue with our clients. We actually have an app. And we have a portal we use to exchange information with our clients. But it's really important that, given all this change that's taken place, that you have an active dialogue with your tax advisors, and that needs to be a proactive discussion, because there's a lot to work through.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And if people are looking to engage, who may not be a client currently but have a conversation with Blum Shapiro, get in touch with you or the team.
Yeah, we'd love to talk with any other chamber members that have an interest in talking with us. Our website is blumshapiro.com. And we're always happy to have an initial conversation to talk about how we can work together and come up with some ideas that would be obviously no cost. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And 25 people, 5,000 square foot office, the 7th floor at 100 Front Street, kind of leading as part of the revitalization and renaissance of downtown. You're there, and
it's exciting.
Adding to the action.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a few new restaurants coming up in the next
there
month
are.
or two.
We're going to
right
have
there.
Quite a choice here. We're going to have to consider our expense control procedures relative to having a Ruth Chris next door. So
that's right. That's another way to advise counselors. Just to go back to the opportunity zone piece for a second. So you said you're seeing a little bit more increased activity.
Yep.
A couple pretty significant real estate acquisitions in the city recently.
Yes.
Took advantage of those opportunity zones. Is there kind of like a typical investor in that regard, or high net worth, or is it really available to anyone?
It's really available to anyone. We've seen, my experience personally has been more with some of our clients that are high net worth investors, or especially people that are in the real estate industry and that can see a project that they think is going to be successful. And then, of course, you get the advantage of paying a lower effective tax rate on the gain associated with that.
So this is a way to kind of avoid capital gains, but you've got to make a commitment to make an investment in a business or a property over the long 10-year period?
Yes, yeah, it has to be a long-term horizon, yeah.
And the idea of that legislation, which was a bipartisan piece of legislation,
Yes.
which is nice to talk about.
It is, yes.
was to try to encourage investment into census districts and areas that had seen kind of chronic underinvestment.
Correct, yes, yeah. And I've definitely seen it drive up property values in those areas. I've had a few clients that had property that were in opportunity zones, and now they're being approached by people that want to invest and buy the property, and it's creating opportunities for them.
That's great. Well,
Yeah.
we're seeing some of that unfold here locally, and
Yeah.
you expand the tax base and you're creating jobs. I mean, that's good for everybody. So
It is.
it's nice to see a bipartisan piece of legislation, period, but
It is.
one that's actually returning dividends. So
Yes.
good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, appreciate you being on. Look
Thank you.
forward to having you back at some point as Blum Shapiro grows here, and
Terrific.
glad to see a local guy do well.
Yes, thanks so much.